This is my lineup analysis output window for SportsCode Pro basketball. So this is basically a cheats way to get really in-depth lineup analysis using SportsCode Pro. Obviously, there's some downsides. You don't have movie functionality, and you do have to kind of like manually type some stuff out. Other than that, though, you're going to get some really in-depth stuff that you wouldn't usually get from SportsCode Pro. So the first thing you need to do is add your names. So I've just added the Rams down here. And if you're just using a one game sample size, you can put the away team in, but it's not really necessary as you're only going to really need the first name up top. And especially if you're databasing a bunch of games together, you're only just going to need the name up the top here, so the home team. Now from there you've got to insert your lineup. Now no matter whether you're analyzing one player, two player, three players, four players, or a whole 5-man lineup, you've always got to put a name in this first box, otherwise it's not going to work. Now I'm going to cheat and use the rename function, which is not on SportsCode Pro. However, you just have to type out these names manually. So I'm going to put Britt, I'm going to put Tirangi, and I'm going to put Bailey. Now, what this window does, it's not combining these three players' stats. What it's doing is it's putting up stats that were occurring when these three players were on the floor together. So when these three players were in the game, this is the data that we get. So you get on offense with and without these players on the court, and on defense with and without these players on the court, and then an overall plus minus. So we can see that with these players on the court, we've got 11 minutes, 12 minutes, and then 11 and a half minutes without. You've got possessions, field goal, 2-point shots, 3-point shots, effective field goal percentage, points per position, points, and then points per pace, which we'll get to soon, points per 40 minutes, and then turnovers per pace. Same with defense, you've got those exact same data points. And then below that, we've got position types. So we've got the half court, transition, so half court positions, transition positions, positions against man defense, and then positions against zone defense, and then the same for the opposition as well, except this time you're the one running man and you're the one running zone. And these data points here, we've got points per position, number of positions, and then points per adjustable pace, which again we'll get to soon. So that's a lot of really good data points, and you can really analyze and start comparing what your lineup's like with and without these particular players, and you can start comparing to other lineups and see what lineups are the best combinations for certain situations. Now, obviously, this window works better with large sample sizes because if you've got more data points, you can kind of really extract really good analysis. However, because you don't always have a large sample size, I've also added this per pace feature, which is essentially a way to standardize a lot of the numbers so you can make kind of analytical conclusions on smaller samples of data, or if you have uneven combinations of data, say one lineup's played 30 minutes and another lineup's play 10 minutes, you can still find out some sort of conclusion. So what that is essentially is you've got this adjustable pace button down here. Now, pace is essentially how many positions you play per 40 minutes. So for example, I've just left it at default 100. However, your team might not play 100 positions per 40 minutes. So you can just go into the scripting here and change where it says 100, and you might go, say, 74. And then that's going to change some of these numbers. So for example, points per pace, 63.6, you can go, okay, so per 40 minutes or per a typical game, typical amount of game positions, with this lineup on the floor, we score 63.6 points per pace, and then without this lineup, we score 67.1. However, we perform a lot better on defense. So those are the sort of analytical conclusions you can make. The last thing you can do is actually include this bonus button. Now, what this bonus button essentially does is that you can add something from the one of the other labels or one of the other position tags from the timeline and kind of get more analytical insights. So, for example, you could add man or press defense, or you could run one of these position tags like out of timeout, baseline out of bounds, sideline out of bounds, transition, or one of your play team actions like pick and roll. I only just coded for pick and roll. And essentially what you can do, and because I don't have a big sample size, I'm just going to have to get rid of some of these names. And if I put pick and roll in here, now when I go execute, now I can see, for example, and again, we need a bigger sample size, this is just an example, but we can see how what our data points are when Taylor Britt runs the pick and roll, or when Taylor Britt and 4 other players run the pick and roll. And we can see again with the with and without, or on defense, we can see how Taylor Britt is when defending the pick and roll. So it's all these different little data points that you can get, and we could put like baseline out of bounds, so you could find out what your best baseline out of bounds starting 5 is, or your best starting five against zone, your best starting five in transition, your best starting five defending transition, your best starting five defending pick and roll or horns, or your best starting five defending sideline out of bounds. There's all these possibilities that you can get from this one output window, and also in SportsCode Pro, so that's really cool. So that's all I've got to show for this output window. If you've got any questions, my email's in the description below. If not, thank you very much and hope you learned something.